Houston, we have a podcast. Welcome to the official podcast of the NASA Johnson Space Center, episode 23, Test Pilot to Astronaut. I'm Gary Jordan, and I'll be your host today. So if you're new to the show, this is where we bring in NASA experts, NASA scientists, engineers, astronauts, all to tell you the coolest parts about NASA. So today, we're talking with Scott Tingle. He's a U.S. astronaut, and he's about to launch to the International Space Station in a few days on December 17th, 2017, for the very first time. We talked about his education going for mechanical engineering, his time in the Navy as a test pilot, his astronaut training, and his expectations for his first flight. So, with no further delay, let's go light speed and jump right ahead to our talk with Captain Scott Tingle. Enjoy.
T-minus 5 seconds and counting. Mark. Launch commit lights are correct. There she goes.
Houston, we have a podcast.
All right, well, Maker, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know this is coming so close to your launch date already. Do you have, what are your plans, from now on? Are you going to be traveling a lot? Do you have some training coming up?
Well, this is my last trip back to Johnson Space Center.
Oh, wow.
I'm here for 5 weeks, which sounds like it's a nice long time, relaxing. No, we'll have none of that. We've got a lot of training. We got to finish up. We've got integrated simulators with the full crew complement. They're coming in from Russia and Japan to do these simulators. I'm finishing up with some evaluations in the EVA community. And then doing a lot of payloads training and getting all my rust knocked off my fingertips so that I can be good when I get back up on station. And then the last week that I'm here, I'll be really focusing on the family and trying to make sure the roof's not going to leak in the next hurricane.
Yeah.
Make sure the bills are paid, make sure things are set up, the cars are running right, they're all registered, and all the little details that takes to run a family. So everything that's going to happen in the next 6 months, I have to look forward in my crystal ball and either take care of it or have a plan to attack it when it comes up for that. And then on October 27th, I leave a one-way ticket to Moscow, and we begin final exams in the Soyuz.
Are you staying there up until your launch?
We'll stay at Star City until about 15 to 17 days prior to launch, and we spend about 2 weeks in Baikonur, which will be in Kazakhstan, and we'll have training there, and we'll start getting on the whatever sleep cycle we have to get on, and we'll use that as a little bit of relaxation. But the family will join us out there about 3 days before the launch.
Cool.
And I'll see them from quarantine, from the other side of the glass, and then we'll get ready to go. And then December 17th will be the actual launch.
Yes.
And off to space station we go.
Very cool. Hey, that'll be my first trip to Russia. Actually, is for that launch.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think
That's
I'll be a
awesome.
media escort for Nemo Kanai. Your
Excellent.
crewmate. Yeah, so some of the public affairs folks that are going over there, I'll be escorting his.
That's good.
His
I'm
media.
sure I'll see you there. Make sure you're waving high, and
I will.
And maybe we can get some time off the side to enjoy a beer.
Hey, I hope so. That'll be fantastic. But a lot of your stuff in Russia though are you going to be doing some Soyuz training over there?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We'll go through and we'll do some refresher type training on the Russian segment. We'll do some refresher training and final exams for emergencies and daily ops on the Russian segment. Mm-hmm. And then the big push, we'll have several simulators for Kanai, myself, and our commander Shklopirov in the Soyuz, and those by far will take the most time for us to prepare for, and they'll be the hardest simulators to get through, the Soyuz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was we did a podcast a while ago, actually, now with Randy Bresnik talking about that stuff and his final training, and especially with Joe Akaba too, because he had the accelerated program where he had to jam it all in within 6 months before his trip up. So yeah, they all talk about the difficulties of that. Yeah. And Russian language too. How's Russian language training for you?
Well, Russian language training has been a challenge. They always say it's the first 10 years that are the hardest. So I've only had 7 or 8 years of it, so I'm not quite over the hump yet.
That's still quite a bit. Yeah.
It is, and I can survive. But when things get really busy and they start talking really fast, I got to get them to slow down. I can't. It's very hard to keep keep up. I can pick up some keywords, and I can kind of sense that something's not right, and we got to be doing something. But the details, the devil's in the details with this in this business.
Oh yeah.
You know, so you got to. It really exercises my patience and my trust, which I have 100% trust in my crew and my Russian compadres over there. That includes all the ground crew, all the engineers, all the management, all of my other cosmonaut colleagues. I really do trust them, and they trust me. So it kind of fills in some of the gaps that we see in the language.
Hey, trust is key.
Absolutely.
I myself minored in Spanish, and that's supposed to be one of the easier ones to go from English to Spanish. And
Right.
honestly, if I don't practice, which I don't, I lost almost all of it. So it
Right.
just takes constant practice, and especially with Russian.
Absolutely.
Russian is one of those harder ones to go from English to Russian, especially because it uses a whole new alphabet. So.
Yeah.
I'm sure they expose it to you quite a bit, too. How often do you get refresher training?
Well, when I was here, I was getting 4 hours a week. This
There you
is
go.
after I was assigned, and there in Star City with a native Russian teacher. I was getting 4 hours a week as well.
Wow.
But now that we're in the final throes and getting ready for launch, we're really focusing on the simulators. And it's kind of funny because I can be at a party and I can kind of have a small conversation with my Russian colleagues, and we'll laugh and we can tell jokes. And sometimes I need some help. It's like, wait a minute, I didn't quite get that one.
Yeah.
But once we get into the simulator, assuming everything's kind of going as planned, the language just happens, right? Because we train so much to it. We know the keywords. We've been through the checklist 100 times. We kind of know what each other's thinking,
Yeah.
and we can operate off of keywords together. And so it becomes a subset of the vocabulary. But when things start going off nominal, which they do all the time in the simulator,
Sure.
we really have to slow down and make sure we're communicating.
Yeah. And I'm sure because you do so many runs in the Soyuz, it's almost like, could you do Soyuz operations in the English language, or have you done it so much in the Russian language that that's just what you're used to now?
Well, to me, it's about. I'd probably say it probably would have to be in Russian because everything's in Russian. The buttons are in Russian. The menus are in Russian. The switches are in Russian. Everything's in Russian. But I have not transitioned to thinking like a Russian yet. I'm working very hard on it, and I'm getting closer and closer. But I still, when they say, включен, кнопку, I think turn on the switch, and then I turn on the swch.
Yes.
Whereas
you have to translate to English
Yeah,
in your head.
whereas ideally I would just hear it and go boom. And I'm almost there, and I'm maybe on this next trip I'll take a big huge stride forward.
Have you dreamed in Russian yet?
They always say that. I don't remember any dreams in Russian.
Oh, okay.
My brain is just not wired for.
I think
for
I had one
languages.
dream in Spanish when I was taking the class. I had to take an interpretation class for one semester,
Yeah.
and that was, someone reads to you in English, and you have to translate either simultaneous or consecutive to Spanish, vice versa too,
Yeah.
from Spanish to English.
Yeah.
And when I was taking that class, I was just exposed to it so much that I started dreaming in Spanish, and I really wish I stuck with it because that was. I've honestly lost a lot of it so far, just not taking it.
Yeah, and I always think, sometimes it's definitely been some of the most challenging and frustrating parts of the training. So on the bad days, I'm like, God, I don't know how to do this anymore.
Yeah.
This language is just killing me. But on the medium to okay days, I come back thinking, I've put a lot of time into this, and I'm making progress. As slow as it is, I'm making progress. I need to keep going with it, even if I never fly in space with the cosmonauts again, because it's another language. There's tons of things going on all the time between the United States and Russia,
Yeah.
and having this skill is one of the benefits of being in this community. And the people over in Russia are like a second family to me.
Yeah,
So
especially because you spend so much time
I want to
there.
maintain communications.
Right.
I want to continue that process.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is an international space station, right? We got to work all
Absolutely.
together, and you're right. It is a family. We're all going towards the same goal. So,
Absolutely.
So that's pretty cool. Well, Maker, besides all your training, I really wanted to just kind of go through your story. And if you don't mind, we could start with growing up in Massachusetts. That's kind of your home, right? Did you move a lot, or just kind of stick around Massachusetts?
I was pretty much Massachusetts. I was born in Attleboro, Massachusetts.
Okay.
I spent some time in Bangor, Maine, and then we moved down to Randolph, Massachusetts when I was I think, in fourth grade.
Okay.
And so from fourth grade to the time I left to go to Purdue University, I was in Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because you went to next was Votech School High School, right? Was right before you went to college. So
I did, yep.
What got you there?
Well, I had a choice. I was in a community that was participating in the local vocational regional high school, called Blue Hills Regional, or I could go to the town of Randolph High School for that. And the high school was at the time was a good high school, and it had a lot of your standard academic things, and people that went to college went to there, and all this stuff. But the vocational school, drugs were starting to get on the rise, and and things like that. But so the vocational school at that point was kind of had me interested right from the get-go. I was really good with my hands. I liked motorcycles and cars and things that fly and all this other stuff. And they had a really good design program, for machine drafting. And so I went there and I got to experience. They had a great program. You go up to you start at the high school, and you start in a shop. And I was in metal fabrication, and then I went to machine working shop, and then towards the end of the year, I went up to my choice, which was machine drafting. Yeah. And so by the time I got done with my sophomore year, I had experienced so many hands-on types of things that would only help me as an engineer or as an operator of some machine, like an airplane. Yeah. A small, fast airplane with weapons.
Yeah, with
weapons.
There you go. Which is eventually what you got into. But I talked with Joe Acaba before he launched, and he had a similar thing. And he didn't go to a Votech school, but he did have a welding class, and he had a teacher that really inspired him to pursue more of a science, technology, a STEM career. Right. And maybe it was because it was hands-on. Maybe it was because of trust. Were the educators kind of influential to you? Your teachers that
they were influential from the standpoint of if you want to do it, then do it. Go try it. Don't worry about failing. Just do it, and we'll work it from there. They were very inspirational from that standpoint. At that time frame, we did not have a lot of folks coming from this high school going to college, and I didn't think about that when I decided to go there. I just went there because I thought they had a really good program. Yeah, and it turns out to be one of the best decisions I've ever made. By the time I was in 11th grade, I was already working part-time as a machine draftsman, and then on my senior year, because I had excelled on a lot of the program requirements, instead of going to school on my shop weeks, I would go to work. And so that I saved up enough money to get me through my first year of college, and so I never would have gone to college had I not had that opportunity.
How about that?
Yeah.
Well, what was it someone or some event that inspired you that says, you know what, I want to take that next step and go to college?
Well, I decided very early that I really wanted to be an astronaut. I mean, very young, before junior high school, before I was in school, and I was looking for ways to do that, and I knew that becoming an engineer would be a good thing, because the next step is I want to be a pilot, and then after a pilot I want to be a test pilot, and then after a test pilot I want to try to be an astronaut. And so to me that was the path. And when I looked at it, I was like, okay, do I like doing all of these things? And if I never get any higher than engineer, is that good enough? Absolutely, yes. I would enjoy that. That would be great. And so that's how I kind of worked, stepping through those goals. And the vocational background just made that, having an engineer that actually has been down and bent metal and drilled holes and put things together and seen how it doesn't work and how it could work. Yeah. Huge benefit to any design team. Huge
Did it help
benefit.
You visualize it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And when somebody comes up from the shop and says, hey, I can't get these things to work, I go, okay, let's go look at the drawings. It's like, oh, okay, the tolerances are too tight. It's not realistic. We don't have the control processes on the floor to actually make these tolerances work, so we have to widen them up. Just having that knowledge and having the trust that when somebody from the floor comes up and says, hey, why are you designing it like this? We really need it like this, to listen to them.
Yeah, because it gave you perspective. It gave you perspective on both ends. The design, looking at paper, but then also looking at, thinking about the machines and the guys in the shop. So why mechanical?
Well, the college I went to only had mechanical at the time. Yeah. And so I went, decided to do that. And but I tried to specialize and take as many courses as I could in the thermal sciences, because I had a big interest in aerodynamics and airplanes.
Yeah.
And gas dynamics and fluid mechanics and heat transfer is all what makes airplanes fly.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I did all of that. And by the way, Blue Hills Regional right now has a great program, engineering program now. It's pre-engineering, and they send a lot of people to college now. So
wow.
they've really transitioned. They've got a great equation going
How about that?
for their students. Yeah, I couldn't be more proud of them.
You kind of set the bar here when you were talking about your plan. I'm going to take all these steps to get to astronaut, and then the last two were test pilot astronaut.
Yeah.
Looking at your bio here, you followed it exactly.
I did.
And was that really part of the plan that early? Like you knew that test pilot astronaut was the last two steps from that early?
I did.
Wow.
Yeah. But what I didn't expect, we're jumping ahead here a little bit, but
Sure.
was that at each step, I really liked what I was doing. It was not easy to make the decision to stop being an engineer and go fly airplanes for the Navy. And it was not easy to leave the operational community and go be a test pilot. It was not easy to say, hey, thank you, you've just offered me command of the Navy's biggest test squadron, but I'm going to go be an astronaut. It was not easy. Wow. You know,
Yeah.
But I had to stay true to my plan, and you know, if it wasn't hard, anybody would be doing it. Right?
Yeah, that's true. Because when you're thinking about it, you know, you think, okay, I'll just take that next step. But you're right. When you're in the moment, it's difficult, especially when you enjoy your job, which is, you know, they tell you if you enjoy your job, that's you're basically not working at that point, because that's the best part.
Yeah, and the people involved in each one of those jobs, incredible people, talented, motivated, dedicated. Full of support. They all, you know, became good friends and colleagues. You know, they're my ex-bosses, ex-people that worked for me, just friends in general. And I tell you what, when the cans light underneath me on December 17th, I'm going to be thinking of every one of those folks, and they're going to be coming with me to the space station.
That's true. I mean, you're right. We are kind of jumping around a little bit, but kind of off that point, you know, you kind of worked your way up. You worked, I think that you were an engineer for a little bit, then you were a pilot, but you're working with people in different scenarios. They're both your coworkers, but then also you said you were a leader at some points, and somehow you had to manage. You know, what did you learn along those way, and how to work with others and then eventually manage others?
Yeah. So my first real leadership job was I had just gotten into the Navy, I finished flight training, and I joined my squadron. And I had been previously enlisted because I had to pay my way through college. I needed a job, and I was an ordnanceman, E3, E4 type person. And so I had a lot of experience on the floor, a lot of experience as a mechanic, and you know, working with ordnance and putting things on airplanes and cleaning toilets and whopping floors and things like that. And when I got into this job, I had a lot of instant credibility because I had gone through that process. I had been them, you know, for 6 to 8 years, and so I was able to see dynamics in the community that I was in, and I was able to address problems before they became huge problems. I was able to help people achieve goals. I was able to stop people from doing silly things, you know, and help their families. And it was really inspiring to have that much impact on the people around you, positive impact. Wow. And when I experienced that, you know, my life really started changing towards the teamwork, team building, relationships, leadership type things. It's really the core of everything we do.
Even now, right? I mean,
now.
You're seeing it now in astronaut training. It's not just an astronaut. There's a lot of people behind you, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah, and they're all helping you to achieve the goals and running their own things too.
Thousands of people in 16 different countries.
That's right.
You know,
in terms of collaboration, this is pretty big. You know, you're talking about global collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, I'm sorry for jumping around for those who are listening, because we're all over the place. But we'll go back to your school. You know, you went to get your mechanical engineering. Is it Southeastern Massachusetts University?
That's where I graduated from, but
Okay.
they've recently changed names. They're now University of Massachusetts,
there you go.
North Dartmouth.
Oh, okay, in North Dartmouth. Okay, cool. But then you eventually pursued a master's, and I'm guessing that was part of your plan too.
Yes, and that was Purdue University.
Purdue University, cool. Did you? It says you you were focusing mainly on fluid dynamics or fluid mechanics and propulsion.
Yeah.
What made you pursue that over other specialties?
Airplanes.
There you go. Part of the plan, right?
Absolutely.
Wow. So what is it that about propulsions that really kind of, that really you enjoyed?
Yeah,
Because eventually you worked for Aerospace Corporation, and you were in the propulsion department, right?
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked rockets.
Yeah.
And big turbine engines, big powerful turbine engines
Yeah.
on jet fighters. There's a lot of heat, and there's a lot of science and theory that goes into how they run, how they work, and it just drew my interest.
Absolutely. So what did you do for Aerospace Corporation?
I worked in their propulsion department. I started off working shuttle solid motors a little bit there. And for those that don't know, the Aerospace Corporation is it used to be called Federally Contracted Research Corporation. They got a different name for it now. It's like RAND. It's like a think tank.
Okay.
And they're positioned right next to Air Force Space Systems Command in El Segundo, California.
Okay.
And they're really in charge of just kind of looking over the whole program, the details of the designs, looking at the readiness of the vehicles, and offering their just thousands and thousands of years of experience on helping out the community and overlooking for the government the program and making sure things are ready to blast off.
Wow. So doing the science and the engineering of the propulsion aspect.
Yeah.
Was your next step applying for the Navy to be a pilot?
Yes.
Okay. So did you have any flight experience before you did that?
I did. I had a few hundred hours
Okay.
when I was younger in my undergraduate at University of Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
I enlisted in the Navy.
Oh, so this is back in college. You were already okay.
Yeah, I did. I was 18. I enlisted, and I spent a couple summers at various boot camps and getting educated on how to load bombs on airplanes and things like that. And but one of the benefits was you get the GI Bill and flight training qualified. So I used some of my benefits to go get my private pilot's license, which I did. It took me 3 or 4 years. I was very slow, but I did it. And
During college?
During college. Yep. And I got it. And my first flight was I took my mom flying up to New Hampshire.
Hey, cool.
Yeah, that was cool. That was a fun day. That was
Absolutely.
a fun day. When I got to California, which has a huge aviation community in Southern California, I met a guy who had a Pitts Special. Which is very acrobatic. It's limited to 12 or 13 Gs. It'll stall before you overstress it.
Wow.
And we used to I used to take lunch breaks, and I used to go fly in his Pitts Special right out of Hawthorne, right where they're building SpaceX now.
Wow.
Right out of Hawthorne Airport, and we'd fly out over Palos Verdes, over the Spruce Goose and the Queen Mary, and we'd do Lomschervaux and spins and rolls. And there used to be a guy that comes out of Santa Monica in a Burt Rutan Very Easy, and he would always try to get on my 6 to try to shoot us. And so we would just dogfight for a little bit, and I'd always end up shooting him because he's got the canards, and I was fairly smart. I knew that he couldn't pull forever. He was gonna be limited, and so I'd just bleed him down, and then we'd go in for the kill.
Wow.
And then we'd come back and we'd land, and I'd go back to work as an engineer.
So on your lunch breaks, you were learning how to dogfight. How about that?
Yeah, that was fun.
I'm guessing you had lunch after you did all those crazy maneuvers, right? Not before.
It depends, but there was, and for those that think that like, wow, he can just take all these G-forces and it's no big deal. I had days where I was not feeling so good, right? But I still went. Okay, I never backed off. I just want you to know that. But afterwards, there was a hamburger joint. It just right on the way. It was like really kind of in a bad part of L.A., right? So kind of on East L.A. from between Hawthorne and where I worked, and I always used to stop and get a hamburger. It was just the greasiest thing you've ever seen, but it just made me feel so much better.
Yeah.
After doing all the whifferdills.
Wow, how about that? How long were you in the air before you actually landed and then eventually got the burger?
It's usually about an hour and a half or so.
Wow. Yeah. All right. That's a decent amount of experience too. So there's.
It was fun. I was very comfortable flying upside down by the time I got into the Navy.
So that probably helped you get into the Navy, right?
I didn't list that as a qualification because sometimes they look at that. You can learn bad habits that the military doesn't want you to have.
Oh, yeah.
And some of their worst students are folks that already know how to fly something. And I was warned about that, and so I just kept it to myself for a little while.
Okay.
I had a couple of good instructors that they're like, okay, you obviously know how to fly. What's going on, And I told them I was open about it, but I said it's really important that you know that that I'm here to learn what you want me to learn.
Yeah.
And there's 100 ways to peel the onion, and I want to know how you want me to peel the onion. And so,
well, I think that's the difference, that
Yeah.
you actually went in with that mentality, not the I know everything mentality. You went in to learn. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you went in as a naval officer in 91, right? And then how long until you were actually a Navy pilot?
92.
Oh, how about that? Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
pretty quick.
It went fast. It went fast. And the program I went into, there were no gaps. A lot of folks, if you go ROTC or Academy, they'll give you orders to some other place for a year or two to kill some time. But I went right through.
How about that?
Yeah, it was fast.
So what were some of the first things you were flying?
Well, I started off in the T-34C. It was the Mentor, I believe that's what they called it, and it was a single turboprop. It was one of the fastest thing I'd ever flown at the time, but it was compared to the fighters, it was very slow. But it was a nice little trainer, and we landed 6 months, and we kind of went through the equivalent of a private pilot's license.
Okay.
For VFR type flying only. Then we moved into the T2 Buckeye, which I hated flying. It was so huge. My body did not fit in it. I couldn't reach anything.
Wow.
And I couldn't see over the canopy. It was just, and I had to bring this thing to the boat. I was like, oh my God.
Oh.
It was really hard. But we used that one to actually go through and do some instrument training and some acrobatic training and formation flying. And then we did our first stint, day-only carrier landings out on the USS America.
Wow.
It's decommissioned now, but I got my first straps on the America, and then I graduated from that's intermediate and went into advanced jets, which was the A4.
Okay.
And now the
little bit
A4,
faster, right?
folks talk about the A4, and they're like, I could never fit in that cockpit. It was too small, and it was just too tight. I couldn't move my arms. It was beautiful. One of my favorite airplanes.
Awesome.
It's all mechanical, like no electronics or anything. You just start up the engine, and it either works or it doesn't. And the flight controls are all rod and tube and cables,
right.
and so you're just pushing stuff around, and you're like, yep, that's working. And it had mechanical leading edge slats, so when you got slow, these things would pop down, and when you went fast, they would pop up. All automatic.
Oh, wow.
Well, it's just based off of dynamics, aerodynamics. When they just slide up and down on these rails. Wow. And the cockpit was so tight, it fits you like a glove. And you could feel every little thing that jet wanted you to do. And compared to jets today, the A4 is slow and bulky and whatever. But the roll rate was must have been about 320 degrees a second, maybe 300. It was really fast. In fact, the Angels used to fly the A4 a long time ago because it had such a great roll rate. But but it's definitely one of the top two airplanes that I've ever flown. I love the. If I could buy an A4, I would buy an A4.
Well, how many? So you said it fit you like a glove, and how many G's did that get up to?
I think it was limited to probably 4 or 5. It wasn't. There were old airplanes, and a lot of the limitations we have are for fatigue life, not what it can really take. So,
okay.
We didn't really fight those airplanes to max performance like that.
Okay.
They were there for training, and they worked out good. But we did a lot of form flying. We did a lot of night flying, and we brought that airplane to the ship as well, day only. But
it didn't have lights or anything, or was it just difficult to fly at night?
Landing at the ship at night is the scariest thing you'll ever do, and so we offload that training to your final airplane with all the bells and whistles. The F-18 is the one I got.
Oh, okay.
And so going at night in an A4 is could it be done? Yeah, they used to do it all the time, but it's high risk.
Yeah, definitely. So. How about those first couple times landing on the aircraft carrier? I'm sure that's a stressful time.
Yeah, it's very stressful, and you're by yourself.
Yeah.
You want to talk about somebody giving you the keys and say, "Here, don't hurt yourself." That's it. The T2 was kind of okay, and I did okay. I was never the top gun of landing at the ship. When I got to the A4, my first landing was really hard, and to the point where we thought we broke the airplane, but. And it was a bad grade, and since we only did, I think, 6 total landings, to pass, I had to really do good on the last 5.
Oh wow!
Which I did. Okay. I did really good, and I got through on that, slightly above average or whatever.
Cool.
And so that was fun. And then when we got into the F-18 for the final, the airplane that I was assigned to fly, a bunch of new systems and a whole new way to think about operating off the ship, and it was very exciting. We did our first night landings in the F-18.
All right, and I'm sure that was a stressful time too.
It was,
Yeah.
but night, in the daytime you can see everything, and the more you can see, the more scared you get. At nighttime it's like I can't, ignorance is bliss. I can't see the boat moving. I can't see anything. I'm just doing what I have to do, and I'm going to land.
Watching your instruments, probably. Yeah,
pretty much. We have a scan called meatball lineup angle of attack. We look at the meatball that's on the ship. We look at the center line, and we have an angle of attack gauge. And that's all we look at.
All right. So, I mean, how long until you transitioned from, I'm sure this is all training, right, until you were operational?
Yeah, so I joined my first squadron in the end of 1994, and I deployed in the end of 1994.
Okay.
And I spent the holidays of 95 over in the Far East and Middle East. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
How long from there? What made you go to test pilot school? How'd you get there?
Yeah, so I was in the first squadron for the first set of orders is about 3 years, and I applied at the 2-year mark, having achieved the required minimum hours. It's like I can't remember what I think it was like 1,000 hours or something, but as I was going through it, a lot of folks say, hey, you're too early. You got to go get more experience. You got to do whatever. And but I had such an extensive engineering background, I came back selected. And I was the youngest. I wasn't the youngest, but I was the junior person in my test pilot school class.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. So that worked out good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, thinking about test pilots, you said astronaut was in your mind since you were a kid, and I'm sure that test pilot was definitely the last step before astronaut because of heroes like the Mercury 7 and those kinds of guys. That's why you wanted that path?
Well, I wanted, that was the thinking. I always had that goal as the icing on the cake. But being a test pilot, if that was as far as I got, I'm a happy man. It's a great way to make a living. You get to work with some great people. You get to do some crazy things in airplanes, and you get to make things better for the folks that really need them on the front line. Yeah. And so to me, it was just win-win. At that point, I was kind of like, well, yeah, I'd like to be an astronaut, but if it doesn't work out, this is not a bad job.
Well, so for those who don't know, just what is like the overall, what is a test pilot, if you had to describe it?
Yeah, so you're connecting engineering to users. Okay, so when Google goes out and creates this new subroutine or this new platform or something, they don't just sit there in their box and design it and then sell it. They bring people in from the front line, you or beta testers or whatever, and they go, hey, this is what we're thinking. What do you see wrong with it? Can you try this out and give us your comments on it? Hey, what do you think about these design characteristics? And then so they're connecting the user to engineering, and so the engineering test pilot does exactly that. We have experience on the front lines, whether it's flying combat, flying from the ship, or flying whatever vehicle it is, but we also have an extensive engineering background, and so they train us to be able to connect the dots between the two communities and actually provide a better product overall to the operators, to the users that have to be effective, but also to the business managers, because they don't want to have to redo this product at the end of the life cycle.
Yeah. So you're doing feedback both ways. You're saying, you're living these designed aircraft, but then you're also going backwards and saying, hey, fix this. This needs to be tweaked there.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that's why that must have been the thinking of why they selected test pilots for the Mercury 7, is because they were the ones that had this experience. You're designing brand new spacecraft.
Absolutely.
And you need that sort of feedback.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
You said you were working with, you were working with some great people.
Yeah.
So how was that relationship, with the operational side, but then also the engineering side?
Well, there's always little things that go back and forth, like, well, you're a test guy, we're talking tactics, get out of here,
Sure, yeah.
And they'll rib you a little bit. But as I got older and more senior, I went to test pilot school in 96, 97, and so here we are. 20 years later, right? With and I've been at NASA for 8 years, so 12 years after test pilot school, I was working either as a test pilot or as an operational combat pilot. And in the Navy we go back and forth. The Air Force doesn't quite do it like that, but the Navy goes back and forth. So you're always just kind of changing groups and communities and things like that. But during my second tour as a test pilot, I was at the carrier suit department. I was actually the lead for the department, and so anything that went to the ship had to come through us. And we, new airplanes, new systems, whatever it was, and we'd actually go out and certify the ships as safe for flight on their systems, and we'd tweak their systems and make sure they were working just right.
Yeah.
And we'd get calls from folks in Bahrain. They're in the Persian Gulf, and hey, our systems, something's off. We've had a couple near misses here. Can you come out? And we'd get a team together and go out, and we'd look at it and fix it.
Cool.
And do what we needed to do. But that whole process, you're working with military folks, you're working with civil servants, and you're working with contractors.
Yeah.
And they all have different ideas on what's better, what the fleet needs, how things should work. And when you get them all together, and if you're patient, man, the team can pick up a character and a personality of its own, and the product that comes out is just absolutely amazing. Those folks, they are just great Americans. They're great people. They love their job, and they want to do nothing more than just support the troops 110%. And
Wow.
And so seeing all that come to work, and being in the middle of it as a test pilot, somebody that's connecting all of those folks together, really, really rewarding.
Absolutely. So how has that translated to working with folks here at NASA? I'm guessing it's a similar relationship, right?
It's absolutely the same.
Yeah.
And whether you're working commercial vehicles, or you're working Orion, or whether you're working International Space Station and current operations, you've got people all over the world, 16 to 18 different countries at any given time. And you've got new systems, new experiments, new things coming up, and having that skill of being able to pull a team together and really kind of figure out what's the right answer here and watching it work is just inspiring.
Yeah.
I look at some of these teams and the support that they're doing. They're in here on the weekends. They're something's going wrong on the station. They ramp up and they put down whatever they're working on, and they go work this project 24/7 for 6 or 7 days straight. Living on coffee and energy drinks. And I tell you what, I come out of some of these meetings and some of these experiences, and I'm just so inspired by these folks. It's just incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, you being an astronaut, I'm sure you've worked with some veteran astronauts before who have been to space and know the. So I'm guessing, how have they communicated in a very test pilot sort of fashion to others? How does that relationship work with? You've lived in space. You know how this works.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, so it's that can be a little bit tricky because even though folks may have formal training, we've got a lot of folks that don't have formal training, and that's consistent with civilian commercial operations. Not everybody goes through an engineering curriculum or a test pilot curriculum or a flight engineer curriculum.
Right.
But it's really important to include all those people because there's different perspectives.
Yes.
And the users are a very diverse group, and that's really good. The bad part is that everybody's got a different idea sometimes, and getting those ideas together and figuring out what the right path forward can be challenging to do that. And the astronaut office tries very hard to make this happen, so that the program doesn't get a bunch of different perspectives and different directions. They kind of know, and the folks in the community, whether you're in the program or on the operator side or on the flight director side or on the flight controller side, they all understand the dynamic, and so they're all very good. It's like if they need no kidding, this is the answer, they will come back and go, we want a formal memo stating the answer. And and then the meetings start and we figure out what we want to do.
Absolutely.
For that, but it's a complicated process. But again, if it was easy, we'd be flying in space, hundreds of years ago. Right?
Yeah, it's true.
So,
Yeah, no, space flight doesn't really have a reputation of being the easy thing,
That's
easy job to go into. So,
Right.
and especially with that much going on and that many people involved,
Right.
Obviously these are challenges. But your background as a test pilot, like you said before, when you were a test pilot, working with operators and engineers, contractors, everyone getting together and becoming that team.
Right.
That translates
it's amazing.
pretty directly.
Yeah.
So what were the steps for you to go from test pilot to astronaut? Where was that? What came up where you're like, now's the time to apply?
Well, it's funny you should ask. I think I applied, somewhere between 4 or 5 times.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, and my first job out of test pilot school, and I love test pilot school. It was an applied engineering course that you got to fly airplanes, and I flew 22 airplanes while I was just in test pilot school.
Wow.
And which was the highest that they had seen in a long time. I was just I was jumping into different airplanes any chance I could.
Just say yes to everything.
Let's
right?
go, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I put in my first application as when I was working as an operational test pilot at China Lake. And so we were the first guys. We were the guys to IOC, which means initial operational configuration of the Super Hornet. This is the FA-18E and F.
Okay.
And so I spent 2 years out there putting that airplane through its operational paces so that the fleet could take it and go operate in the desert with it and go off of boats and things like that. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't considered developmental tests. That wasn't considered a huge test pilot job. Although that experience I had at VX9 at China Lake was the most valuable experience I have had that relates to what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis here at Johnson Space Center.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just a community cliche kind of thing. If they're going to hire somebody, they're going to hire somebody with developmental test experience, and I'm gonna hopefully we can take a look at that and maybe open that up a little bit as we move forward into the future here.
Right.
But so I had to go back and I did a leadership tour in the Navy, that lasted 5 years, 6 years, or so, and then I went to my second test tour. The whole time I was putting in applications every couple of years, every time they had it. And it went. Then on the last time, I was the carrier suit department head at Pax River, really liking what I was doing. I was moving into the program to be an assistant program manager, and I had just screened for command. I was going to command VX23, which is the Navy's biggest test squadron. Wow. And it was just absolutely a dream come true. And I was like looking at my application for the 2009 class. I was like, well, I gotta go to my grave knowing I tried as hard as I could. I updated a couple little things and then threw in the application. And lo and behold, I got a call, said, why don't you come on down and talk to us? I was like, okay. I'm kind of old. Go, come on down. So we came down, we had a good interview, came out for the second, had a good interview, and then I got the call to be an astronaut. But I had kind of given up a little bit. I didn't give up totally, but I was kind of seeing some writing on the wall that my path was going to be leadership in the United States Navy and having a great career there.
Okay.
But then I got this call to come be an astronaut, and I couldn't resist. Like I said earlier, it was a hard decision. It wasn't easy, but I had to do it.
Right. Wow. So was it? You said you were going back and forth putting applications in. Is that where you realized, okay, I need that developmental experience? Yeah. So
and I had a couple of folks here that I had talked to on and off, and I was always the geek that would surf the new guys that got selected, and then I'd email or call them out of the blue and go, hey, how did you do it? And a lot of them were really good folks that helped me out with some good. In fact, I was trying to decide whether I wanted to go in the Navy or go in the Air Force to be a pilot when I was working as an engineer. And then one class got selected, and it was Taco out at he had just gotten selected from the Navy side, and I called him, and he was one of the guys that actually answered his phone. And I was like, hey, I'm trying to decide if I want to be an Air Force pilot or a Navy pilot. And it was quiet. And then I hear this, boy, there ain't nothing like flying off the ship. The next day I signed up with the Navy.
No way, the next day? All right, there it is. I've made up my mind. How about that? So that I should have asked you before, why Navy over Air Force? Because
I was actually probably leaning towards the Navy a little bit more because I was enlisted in the Navy as during that time frame.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so it was an easier transition, but the Air Force has some really nice machines and some good communities.
Yeah,
that are very, very interesting.
Absolutely.
So.
But you're, even back then, you were calling up astronauts, asking them, what did you do to get to where you are?
Yeah.
And that astronaut made it very clear that Navy was the way to go.
I might not make it to the astronaut corps, but I'm sure as hell going to fly off the ship.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So, taking that Navy experience and your first couple years of astronaut training, and we only have a couple minutes here, but how has that helped you? Your experience in the Navy with, especially, I'm guessing the T-38 was kind of a nice transition, flying more aircraft.
Yeah, it absolutely was. The T-38 is a really fun airplane to fly.
Yeah.
And the ones we have here, I don't know if you've ever been out to Ellington and met those the maintainers out there. Phenomenal mechanics and structural guys.
Wow.
They absolutely, those airplanes are 50 years old.
Wow.
Plus. And the amount of rework and care and TLC they put into those things, it's absolutely amazing. They're a dream to fly. It's like getting in a new car every time. And they're just such good care about that. It's really impressive. Mm-hmm. Makes me not want to fly them because I don't want to break them, but they're really fun to fly. The Navy experience was really valuable from a grit perspective. Flying in a cockpit that's hot, or maybe the systems aren't working right, or you lose an engine, and you're in a poopy suit because you're flying out over the cold water, and you're having a hard time moving and breathing.
Ooh, yeah.
And you learn to overcome these things by just focusing on the things you need to focus on.
Yeah.
I call it being on government time. It's like, hey, I'm working for the man right now. I can't quit. I got to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And then so that the Marines call it, we'll say Semper Fi, never leave a man behind or whatever, and they just drive through it. The SEALs, they just drive through the pain, they drive through the challenge, they drive through the frustration, and you get a lot of that in the with flying in the Navy to make things work out right. But the big thing I take away from all of that experience is the oodles and oodles of people working behind the scenes to make an operation happen. Mm-hmm. You can be the guy that goes out and jumps in the cockpit, but the cockpit you're jumping into, that airplane was just worked on by probably 30 people. And it was probably, you have a whole support of thousands of people making sure the systems are designed right and are working right and are the logistics chain to get the parts to you to keep them running.
Yeah.
And then you have all the operational people that are feeding you the intelligence you need, the information you need to have a safe flight plan, and all the trainers that have taught you how to fly safe formation, execute safe tactics, and certified you in combat operations. And then you have people on the ship making sure you're not going to fly into the back of the boat and making sure you can come home and get that slider at the end of the night.
Yeah.
For that. And so to me, putting that all together, and it's just all of my friends working together to make the mission happen.
How about that?
And it's the most inspiring thing I've ever seen.
Fantastic. Well, you're going to be launching here soon, and I think I'm not sure when we're going to release the podcast, maybe before or after your flight. But you're going to be going up soon here in December. What are some of the things we can look forward to seeing you do on orbit? Do you have EVA's plans, some special experiments, or maybe some social media that you're going to be doing?
Yeah, so we'll be doing some social media a little bit. I'm gonna hand it off to Craig Bernard up at CB office there.
Sure.
He'll help keep me out of trouble. We can do some things there that can get ourselves into trouble pretty good. So I'll send down some ideas to him, and he'll follow through, and he'll filter out the things that'll get us into trouble. Right, Craig? And then
He'll be listening.
Yeah, we'll definitely be doing some science up there. You'll be seeing the little experiments up there. We do have some EVAs coming up. I don't know if I'm going to be going outside or working as the IV inside, helping the other folks go outside.
Okay.
We are going to be capturing some vehicles, some Dragons of Cygnus, I think. We'll be doing some robotics there as well for that. And then we'll be doing a lot of educational outreach events as we call down to different schools, different locations, just to say hey and say, hey, come work in the space community because it's cool.
Yeah. Go,
Thing.
study science, technology, engineering, math. Become a test pilot. Do whatever you got to do to do your dream. And
absolutely. And then,
maybe follow Scott Tingle's path and plan it out from an early age.
Yeah, and talking about the test pilot thing, obviously that's very interesting to me. That's my career path. It's flying the heat is just absolutely wonderful, great experience. But the space community has all types. We have mathematicians, we have scientists, we have advertising specialists, we have marketing, we have PAOs, we have all types of folks involved in this community. So no matter what your love is, if you want to apply that towards space, there's room for you here in this community.
I love it. That is the perfect place to end it. We'll do it right there. Well,
okay.
Maker, thank you so much for coming on the show. For the listeners, just stay tuned till after the music here to learn how you can follow Maker on his journey, and then some of the other accounts on where you can follow along on the International Space Station journey. So again, Maker, thanks again for taking this time, and best of luck on your launch and finishing up your training here in the next couple months, and your 6-month increment aboard the International Space Station.
That's right. Thank you so much. And it's definitely time to get busy. Chop, chop, hubba, bubba.
Houston, go ahead.
Stop of the space shuttle.
Roger, 0J, and I feel fine.
Shuttle has cleared the tower.
Became a peace for all mankind.
Actually, a huge honor to break a record like this.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Never Houston, welcome to space.
Hey, thanks for sticking around. So today we talked with Scott Tingle. He goes by the call sign Maker. So if you go on Twitter, he is @Astro_Maker. And if you follow along on his journey, he said Craig Bernard's going to be doing the bulk of the work, but trust me, once he gets up there and he sees that the view of the Earth from 250 miles above the Earth, it's going to be hard to not take pictures of all the beautiful sights. And he'll be sharing that during his journey aboard the International Space Station for the next couple months. So again, that's @Astro_Maker. If you follow the International Space Station, go to nasa.gov/ISS, or if you go on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we've talked about this a bunch of times before, but again, just go to the International Space Station, all the verified accounts, Twitter @space_station, Instagram @ISS, and you can follow along on the journey there. If you use the hashtag AskNASA on your favorite platform, you can submit an idea. Trust me, I do look at them, and I've already made changes to the show because of some of the suggestions you guys have been sending in. So again, thank you very much. Just make sure to mention Houston We Have a Podcast. That's why it's easy for me to search, and I can find your query. Because Ask NASA, that's everybody asks NASA everything. There's a lot of questions that come about, so we try to answer as much as we can. But for Houston We Have a Podcast, just that'll help me out a lot. So this podcast was recorded on September 25th, 2017. Thanks to Alex Perryman, John Stoll, Pat Ryan, and John Streeter. And thanks again to Captain Scott Tingle for coming on the show. We'll be back next week.